Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Earlier this week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that his government would insist on demilitarizing the southern Syria territory between Damascus and the Golan Heights border in order to avert any takeover by hostile forces. He also mentioned the top of Mount Hermon on the Syrian side, of course, as a high ground that Israel would defensively keep for the time being. Meanwhile, his defense minister, Israel Katz, signaled out the Druze community as having a special relationship with Israel, indicating that the IDF will not let the new regime under Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, also known as Ahmed al-Shara, to impose its rule over it. Where could the presumed new Syria be headed now that it is coming back into the Arab fold, even though it is led by a jihadist? For today's discussion, we're joined all the way from the United States by Professor Russell Berman, who formerly served as a senior advisor at the U.S. State Department's policy planning staff, currently the director of the Islamic World and Middle East Working Group at Hoover Institution at Stanford University. It's great to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Also joining us from elsewhere here in Israel is Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, who is a fellow at the Jerusalem Center, the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, and also a lecturer on Turkey, among others. It's very good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you.
And with me here in the studio is our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, set a stage for us.
Well, you know, there was a famous French author who, after the Soviets took over half of Germany and made it East Germany, the GDR, this French author said that he loves Germany so much that he's excited about having two of them rather than one, East Germany, West Germany. There are many Israelis who, after the Arab Spring started 14 years ago, wanted to see Syria broken up to several cantons or provinces. Apparently, this is not the case right now. There is an effort by the Arab countries as well as by Western countries to have Syria unite under its present management, Ahmed al-Shara. We have seen the EU freeze some of the designations and sanctions on banking, energy, industry, or transportation. They kept it on the Assad family, but they let go regarding the economy at large, including, for some reason, the export of luxury goods from Europe to Syria. Apparently, they want to make a profit. Who needs luxury goods in such a country impoverished by the Assad regime? And of course, President Assisi of Egypt summoned al-Shara to the summit meeting of Arab leaders. There is an effort to see at least the next 3, 4, 5 years as a period of stabilization, following which the world, including Israel, will consider whether Syria is now a peace-loving and restful neighbor, or whether it is back to its al-Qaeda origins, the origins of the current rulers.
The current ruler, all of his ministers, including his generals and people in the new so-called reformed military and education system. But the Europeans came out and they said, we expect to see a process of reformation, and then we will accommodate that with the lifting of sanctions. None of their demands were met by the current interim government, who are doubling down of their Islamist and jihadist aspirations, including by changing the curriculum in schools and in the various institutions at hand, going after the various police organizations and security forces and such, forcing them to learn Quran in order to know how to implement their jihadist worldview on
Sharia law is
people.
coming.
Well, apparently so, but that is not something that Syria has been used to, and yet the European Union seems to ignore that and lift sanctions irrespective of those developments. And with that being said, if I may turn now to Professor Berman, the United States has yet to come out and publicly states its position on Damascus, despite the fact that every, from Tulsi Gabbard, who is confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, all the way to statements by the various contenders and people in office in the Trump administration, none of them seem to be excited about this HTS takeover of Damascus, and they would much rather see another figure take root with keen aspirations and no need to reform.
Well, Jonathan, it's enormously complex inside Syria. You focus the discussion, however, on these outside perceptions of Syria. Sometimes someone should write a long book about the ineffectiveness of EU foreign policy, just absolutely irrelevant to everywhere in the world, including, frankly, to the EU itself. But that's another discussion. The foreign policy of the United States regarding Syria today clearly has not yet been settled. In addition to all these objective reasons to hesitate about a Syrian foreign policy, of course, we have a new administration, and it is focusing on other issues right now. Syria is, believe it or not the top of the list for Washington, hasn't been forever, and not now. My sense is that there's a range of opinions inside the Trump administration's foreign policy leadership, from conventional internationalists to almost isolationists. That implies different relationships to Russia, to Turkey, to Israel, and unfortunately, I suspect that the U.S. foreign policy towards Syria, when it is eventually formulated, will be more a function of U.S. interests with regard to these outside actors rather than to the domestic complexity of Syrian society and culture. Sure, the European Union can imagine that a unified, centralized Syria will emerge presto changeo out of thin air, but it is objectively a very divided country. Jolani is not a NASA. He does not unify the Syrian people around enthusiastic nationalism. The Kurds in the south, the Druze in the south, the Kurds in the north, the northeast, they could have legitimate claims on independence or de facto independence. The big question of the future of Syria is the degree of decentralization that will be necessary in order to avoid having a police state.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Cohen Yanarocak, I'd like to hear your take on this. From a Turkish perspective, naturally, Ankara has deep-rooted interests in al-Julani succeeding in his enterprise to take over Damascus and consolidating his power over all parts of Syria. The top priority for Turkey, both on the domestic file as well as on the foreign policy file, remains the Kurdish question, particularly also in northeast Syria. How can we identify the various complexities from that school of thought?
Okay, first of all, as you also mentioned, the most important issue for the Turks is the Kurdish question. In the northeast Syria, we have the PYD-YPG organization. In the Turkish eyes, this organization has symbiotic relations with the PKK terrorist organization. But we all know that the West is not looking at PYD-YPG as the extension of the PKK, and this is the most important disagreement between the two sides. And given the fact that Turkey has become the most important winner of this, overtake in Damascus, the Erdogan administration seeks to push El-Julani to, let me say, to eliminate or to absorb the Kurdish elements into the under the umbrella of the new Syrian government. They want these elements to be dissolved, and if we can also say that to be assimilated within the dominant so-called Syrian identity. And therefore, in every opportunity, the Turkish administration is putting an emphasis on the territorial integrity, the so-called territorial integrity of Syria. But very ironically, they are the ones who are violating the Syrian territorial integrity since 2016. We all know that the Turkish military launched 3 different operations. They are controlling the Jarablus, Afrin, Ras El Ain, and Tel El Abyad regions, thanks to 3 different military actions. Also, the Turkish government, the Turkish president, in a constant manner, again, criticizing the Israeli control in the newly occupied regions of Syria, but they are, of course, disregarding and ignoring the very fact that they are also the occupiers in the same country. But still, Turkey does not see itself as an occupying force. Turkey portrays itself as the, let me say, the big brother of the new Syrian administration. And of course, they are providing them this very important, economic aids, logistical aids. We all witnessed that the Turks are talking out loud that they are going to provide to the new Syrian government all necessary things that they need, starting from the military to the infrastructure project. So we can understand that Turkey wants a very strong Syrian administration, a very strong El-Julani in Damascus. But what we are seeing today, especially after Benjamin Netanyahu's latest statements, the Druze in the south, they are no longer, I don't think that they would be eager to stay under the Syrian flag. Of course, this will create a very huge headache also for Erdogan, because he even could not solve the Kurdish question in the northeast of the country.
Well, when I look at those matters, and I will for a moment try to analyze it in a limited fashion, the Druze, the Kurds, all of them, they would rather receive a certain list of assurances from Damascus that would ensure their way of life and their own security, rather than go on an adventure of establishing a new state. And I think this goes, of course, to our PKK elements that are threatening to push forth the whole concept of Rojava and the ideals thereof. But nonetheless, the majority are not keen on this adventurism for various concerns and also fatigue. This country has been in devastating war for a very long time, and they're keen on some peaceful periods, but we'll have to wait and see. Mr. Owen.
Well, if you look at the various countries in the world where there is a binational population or multi-confessional or various ethnic groups, let's take the case of Cyprus, for instance, where there is a Greek majority and a Turkish minority. If there is no equilibrium, Turkey comes in and invades. Of course, this is way back, 1964 or so. And there is still this particular state of affairs. You can take what happened between Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina regarding Kosovo. And even when the Maronites under Bashir Gemayel lured Israel to intervene in Lebanon, it had also a devastating effect. So there must be an equilibrium inside the state. If there is no internal equilibrium, outside forces will intervene. It is in Giuliani's interest not to try to impose his will on the Kurds and the Druze.
Indeed. And on the Christians, for that matter, and the Alawites. And I mean, there's so many different minorities in Syria. He needs to be very tentative to those matters, and he doesn't have the forces to back anything beyond what he's already doing. But one point that we need to take into consideration, and that is the fact that Israel's declaration with regard to Syria are naturally consented by the United States. Israel would not make such a dramatic announcement without Washington's approval. All the while, Turkey is waiting to negotiate northeastern Syria with the Americans and has yet received the aspired phone call from President Trump, nor has it received a seat on the table to discuss the future of Syria, which is a very pressing issue for Ankara. Professor Berman, I'd like to hear your take on this. Why is this taking so long? Naturally, it's not on the top of the priority list, but nonetheless, Turkey is an important member of NATO. The Bosphorus is an important artery of the whole North Atlantic architecture of defense. And therefore, where are we expected to see the negotiations between Ankara and Washington lead to? In this context, of course, the withdrawal of, or pending withdrawal of U.S. forces from northeast Syria is also up for consideration, and President Trump has made statements about it.
The administration is still a new administration, and President Trump is trying to undertake significant changes in U.S. policy, domestic and foreign. He hasn't even got his full team through the Senate yet. So it really cannot be surprising that things are going slow at this point. Having said that, I understand the problem that you're underscoring, Jonathan, that Turkey has important interests with regard to the Kurds, with regard to the PKK-YPG issue, and the United States and Turkey have been on different sides of this historically. I think that the crux of the matter may be not in Syria. Syria has to find some kind of decentralized constitution if it wants to stay together. But from the international point of view, I think something else might be at stake. Turkey's importance as a NATO ally is a function of the degree to which the Trump administration considers NATO important. If the Trump administration considers NATO important, then Turkey's important. If, however, and there have been indications that there may be a shift on NATO and the relationship with the transatlantic alliance, if the Trump administration decides that a fraying of the NATO alliance is inevitable, then all of a sudden Turkey becomes less significant as a defense ally for the United States. In that case, the pro-Kurdish independence elements in the administration might gain an upper hand. I don't have any evidence that that's the direction that things are going to go, but I do see that, as I said before, from a U.S. point of view, this may not be solved solely in terms of the internal domestic Syrian dynamic. As a scholar, I guess I wish it would. But in the world of real geopolitics, it's going to be about the relationship of the United States to Turkey, to NATO, to Russia.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Cohen, Yanarocak, I'd like to hear your take on this. And to what degree does the relationship between President Trump and President Erdogan play a factor here?
Okay, actually, the Turkish side tends to see this relationship as not a problematic one, but in my opinion, it is very problematic. Donald Trump was the only US president who imposed 5 different sanctions regime against Turkey. So despite the fact that Erdogan is trying to portray this relationship as a brotherly relationship, that he's frequently calling him as his friend, I think the Turkish side is very much frightened from Trump's unpredictability. Okay, when we make a comparison, maybe the Turkish side may may prefer Trump rather than Biden, because during the Biden administration, they had almost no contact. They never invited Erdogan to the White House. But on contrary, when we were looking at Donald Trump's first administration, we witnessed 2 different visits to White House. So this is something very challenging. On the other hand, when we are talking about the Kurdish issue, I also would like to remind you that during 2019, when Turkey launched its operation against the Kurds in northeast Syria, then Donald Trump, at first phase of the operation, provided them a green light, and even agreed to withdraw the US troops from the region. But later, in my understanding, because of the pressure that was pushed on him from the Pentagon, he made a U-turn and stopped Turkey by sending then the Vice President Pence to Ankara. So it may happen again. Turks are still pushing Donald Trump so that he would withdraw from northern Syria. But here we have a problem on the Turkish point of view. Because of this ongoing friction with the state of Israel, they cannot manipulate and persuade Donald Trump as they want. And as we can clearly see here, when Israel is taking these bold moves in the southern Syria, Turks cannot realize such important decisions in the north of the country, and they're all stuck. There is a deadlock in northeast Syria. They cannot solve this question, and I think because of the U.S. presence there, without the U.S., they will not be able to solve this in a unilateral manner.
Mr. Cohen, the Israeli position, I'd like to bring that into the mix, is quite vigorous. It first and foremost, as we stated at the beginning of today's panel, is very keen on its own security, and secondly, it seeks to bolster its relations with friendly elements within, of course, the immediate neighborhood of Israel, or the sphere of influence, so to speak. Can we see this turn into a complex scenario for the worse, or is this also with a lot of base for a good outcome?
Well, Israel doesn't have any illusions regarding its ability to bring about regime change in Syria, or to try and calibrate.
It's also not interested in that.
Yes. So no. Usually, there was a time in the 60s when some Israeli leaders, such as Yigal Allon and Yitzhak Rabin and others, had this illusion, harbored this illusion, and one reason they wanted to effect some change was in order to link up with the Druze in Sweda, in Jebel Druze. They are no longer thinking along these lines, but of course they want to protect this particular area of Syria, which is also close to the Jordanian border. Israel has security interests in the region between the boundary and 40 kilometers away to Damascus, which is a constant threat over the regime if they misbehave. Let me just point out that there was an initial contact between Marco Rubio and his counterpart, Hakan Fidan.
Right.
And while it seems as if foreign policy, is going to emanate from the White House, from the National Security Council, rather than from various cabinet departments, it is still a good first step.
Indeed. Well, we're drawing near to the end of the program, and I'd like to give our panelists a chance to provide a very brief analysis, less than 45 seconds each. What should we focus on? Talking about Syria, talking about Turkey, talking about U.S. foreign policy and such, and Israel within that equation, of course. Professor Berman, we'll start with you.
Well, domestically within Turkey, we should pay attention to whether there can be development toward a principle of federal decentralization that would allow the various communities high degree of autonomy. Externally, of course, it's the international chessboard, U.S., Russia, Turkey, Syria.
Dr. Cohen, Yanarocak?
I would like to divert your attention to Turkish silence after Benjamin Netanyahu's historic speech 2 days ago. We still did not hear anything concrete from Erdogan, any official response from the Turkish Foreign Ministry. I don't know how we should evaluate this silence as if they accept this or not. But soon, I think we will hear from the Turkish side their new strategy, and in my opinion, the two countries may go into a real friction soon in Syria.
One bone of contention between not Turkey per se, or Turkey, but the Erdogan government and Israel has been Gaza and Hamas. And perhaps once there is some sort of settlement, an American, Arabian, or Arab-Israeli settlement, and Hamas is no longer an effective force there, perhaps relations with Turkey will be more normalized.
In any event, we will continue to follow closely all of the various developments pertaining to this topic. And with that, I would like to immediately thank Dr. Cohen Yanarocak, Professor Berman, and Mr. Amir Oren, of course. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.